Yep, duly
We do
noted,
have-
April 5th.
The operational referendum
Yep.
will be on the ballot on April 5th. And Dean is going to report out from the committee, but I know that the board members and administration have been incredibly diligent about attending numerous meetings and presenting the information about the referendum. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate Monday night, Dan and I were at the high school parent forum, which it's wonderful that you do that and that you've been able to maintain and sustain that. And it was wonderful that you let the superintendent take that amount of time in your meeting and put that information forward to the parents. They had excellent questions, and again, it was a wonderful opportunity to have a really great interactive session. So I appreciate that.
Very good. Next up is the administrative reports, and the one we have listed in the board docs is superintendent's report, with the topic being strategic planning update. If there's anything else you want to say?
Okay, I'm going to keep it very brief tonight since we don't have all of our board members present, so we'll bring this back again to the next board meeting for a more detailed discussion. In fact, we'll likely have an agenda as a discussion rather than a report from me. But I'll just tell you that I reported briefly last time that the planning committee has completed their work. And what we're doing now is taking all the information that was put together from that, and basically we left with 5 big buckets that we tried to put all of our key ideas and thoughts that we're going to turn into our strategic plan, and now it's up to the administrative team to kind of decipher that and then ultimately put together goals and action plans. But along the way, we promised an opportunity for board input and feedback as well on that. And so what we'll have for you is a detailed documents to share out and give you an opportunity to read those in advance, offer your insights and so on, that we can then take forward along the way as we continue this planning process. So some key dates coming up. I actually just got those scheduled today, so for our administrators in the room, we'll be getting an email on this. I am meeting with Joanne Sternke on April 15th. She, of course, is one of our facilitators, and she's going to be our key person working with our administrative team and taking this next step forward and to kind of work out the planning process there. And then at our April 21st administrative team meeting, she'll join us and we'll start that process. So that'll give this board an opportunity on April 13th meeting to provide some feedback and see the information the committee came up with that we can utilize as we move forward. And we'll keep that lines of communication going throughout the process as well. It won't just be a one-time shot, that you'll continually be an opportunity to see the work that we're doing and as we move along. And we'll talk more specifics about how we'll do that. So those are the dates coming up. In April is where we're really going to get started now to put this into a plan.
So Dan, what's the date that you have scheduled to basically present the information to the board and get their input? Because what you just said, and this is my understanding too, and I seem to be getting this a little differently sometimes, that basically the information that's been assimilated by the committee comes to the board so that they can have a discussion and input on that, and then it goes to administration for action plan. Right now, it looks like the way the dates are set up, that there isn't a...
No,
board
is April 13th.
The board is April 13th.
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
We didn't...
Okay. I made that clear.
Sorry, no, I wrote
Yeah,
that.
so next board meeting, April 13th is when we'll have that discussion. And then I follow up with Joanne on the 15th, and then our admin team begins their work on the 21st.
Are we going to have, does that need to be in like an hour scheduled for workshop work, or?
Well, I think what we'll do, will depend on the length of the regular agenda. Whatever we don't complete that night, we can continue the discussion. And so I really don't know what to expect as far as time, but we'll definitely want to have a significant amount of time, yes. And I think
At
looking
least
ahead
an hour,
right
right?
now, yes, and I think that's reasonable. Looking ahead, our agenda should be light enough that we can schedule that as a key part of that meeting.
To Susan's question, is it appropriate to think about carving that out as an hour, like designated somehow differently than within the board meeting agenda, like the workshop format, the way you mentioned?
Well, that's
I
something
mean,
we can discuss, and I guess if, at this point, we've been trying to not schedule extra meetings, but that's something I think that can come up that evening if we feel that the work is not complete, that we can schedule an additional meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that would be the kind of thing we'd schedule from 6 to 7 that night and then have the board meeting following. If we did a workshop format, just to talk about the strategic plan?
Yeah, that probably won't work, because I'm quite certain that we're going to have a
Full session
full
already?
session on
Okay.
the 13th,
Okay.
so.
Okay, so it would have to be toward like 8:30 or 9 o'clock or something that night, if we wanted to tack on more of a discussion of the strategic plan?
Well, based on looking ahead with our tentative agenda, that should be the key agenda item
Oh,
that
fine.
night.
Okay.
So it's not that we're gonna have a long meeting at both, and then the end,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I agree, though. I strongly support that there be, not wild about starting into a discussion and saying, oh, we're not done, it's 10 o'clock, we're all tired, we really need to go home, I mean, because we're shot. But, and then you're starting your April 15th meeting and your April 22nd meeting, and how are you gonna get the board's input back in there? One of the things that happened in the strategic plan before was there wasn't a feeling that the board had been an integral part of this process. And because of the scheduling of the meetings, there was really only one board member on that committee. So we got 6 people that really need to be brought up to speed and then to understand kind of what the committee felt about all of this.
Keep in mind, not everything has to be finished in that first meeting. This plan is not gonna be finalized until likely June, and so we'll be working on this over the next 3 months. So this will not be a one-time deal that the board has discussion on this.
So more of an introduction on the 13th, and then
Yeah.
If we decide.
It'll be an
that-
ongoing process.
Okay.
Yeah, I expect several discussions.
I'm
over
just
time.
thinking that we should be cautious about taking a group of administrators on the 21st, say, okay, I've got 5 things, start building the action plans, I'm gonna take the action plans to the board.
But keep in mind, that will be one of many meetings that we have with the administrative team.
I get that, I'm saying, I really think this board, because 6 people were not on that committee, needs to be an integral part of this strategic plan process and the 5 top pieces prior to that being delegated to administration to be worked into.
Well, I
action.
guess I would recommend that you have that discussion on the 13th about how you're going to do that as a board.
I thought we just had it. What did I miss? I thought we just said we were gonna have this discussion as a board about this.
Right? But as far as,
I think the only question is, can we be assured that there is sufficient time to have that the other 6 board members are gonna feel they're having adequate time to have input on the information, not just understand what it is and how they got there. But again, I mean, we've got somebody out here teaching right now who has great teaching experience in Susan, but these people are probably gonna have some really good input on this kind of plan, particularly from the perspective of teacher-student work. I just wanna make sure that we allocate sufficient time to allow the input from those people.
And the 13th is the first chance to get started on that, so I think we'll get a feel for that, how much additional time or meetings might be needed after that.
Yep.
Good, thank you, Dan. Other things in the superintendent's
oh,
report?
that's all I have.
That's all you have?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Next up is a board report about the Monona Grove Education Foundation from Susan Manning.
Oh, here I am. You're doing so well on the time, and I'm just,
It's easier when half the people aren't here.
I know, I didn't realize. Okay, the Monona Grove Education Foundation report, Joyce was kind enough to post that on board docs for us, which was great. They met on March 8th, 2016. Superintendent Dan Olson reported to the foundation board about the operational referendum scheduled for the April 5th ballot. Did, again, an excellent job of that information. Student scholarships for 2016 are being processed through the high school guidance department. That's how that usually works. If you have thoughts about that, you could talk to foundation board members about that. The MG21 open house was scheduled for March 16th, and board members were encouraged to attend, so that was nice. I know many of us did. The foundation board approved updates to the foundation grant policy that effectively updated their policy and added points of clarity. Again, they continue to work on their grant policy, and those are basically their grants to teachers. Grants including the acquisition or purchase of computer software or related equipment requires written approval of the appropriate administrator at the time of grant submission. So if a teacher is submitting a grant relating to purchase of computer software or related equipment, there has to be a written approval from the administrator in the building at the time that grant is submitted. I think they had language that was similar to that, but it's very clear now, and the board approved the additional language. Grants awarded by the Monona Grove Education Foundation shall be made using the Monona Grove School District purchasing system. They also clarified that. The foundation board approved an expenditure of up to $500 for a community profile ad. They're finalizing approval on the teacher grant proposals. I think they had them almost completed. They had not made full announcement yet. Jennifer Pickle provided an update on the 2016 gala, which will be honored, guess what? Coach Dan Sweeple, which will be kind of fun. Because here's an MG student who now has been here in the district for lots of years. Discussion relating to finalizing the venue is continuing. They still haven't made a final decision on the site, and committees for fundraising and promotion are being formed. The date is November 5th, 2016, so write that down. And thank you letters have been sent to all sponsors. There was also information provided, and the board is still, I think, working on exactly what their role would be in relation to this project. Jeff Schreiner has a project to form a Hall of Champions that effectively what they were talking about was a wide screen upon entry to the high school cafeteria area, I think, which would continue to replay things about great student achievements. Plans are still being finalized. Future meeting topics will include donor thank you procedures, time and date of meetings, review of scholarships, and future fundraising projects. If there's anything else you would like me to take back to the foundation, let me know.
Just a point of clarification, since I know Jeff Schreiner's associated with athletics, is the Hall of Champions really only athletics in focus when you think about student achievements?
It was my understanding it would not be limited, but I don't know that that was clarified, and I think that's an excellent question.
Curious.
There's
Excellent
no
question.
formal plan yet. We've got a lot of ideas at this point.
Right. Because that could be really awesome.
Is there
Thank you.
is there a committee that's
No.
maybe there should be.
When we actually formalize it, yeah.
But
Right now it's a lot of it.
there's money that's been collected.
Well, that's separate from the formal, recognition piece of the Hall of Champions and Hall of Fame piece. This is more of an informational thing, the monitors that you mentioned and so on. But that, following that would be more of what we're looking at as a formal recognition program, which we don't have in place yet.
Okay. Is there anything in greater detail that you want to?
No,
The board, you could do that in a superintendent report.
Sure.
Another time.
I think certainly as we've come closer to finalizing that, absolutely, that's something the board should be aware of, and we'll make sure we report out on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. That's cool. Let's see what's next. Sorry, I just accidentally closed up on my board doc. Next up, board report. I think Susan Fox already provided to us in board docs the policy committee report. It appears in our board docs. I guess is the question, as the chair, should I read it? How does that work when the person who's supposed to be giving the report isn't here?
I think you have the written report, and so if anyone, board members have questions, we've got, certainly, that's the meetings on the committee as well, and can answer any questions.
Yes. I was under the impression she was gonna, you were gonna read it, but that's fine. It does, I really don't know.
Well,
I don't
guess
mind
as
reading
board
it.
members, do you want it read out loud, or?
What's your pleasure? Because I'm happy. I love the sound of my own voice.
Yeah,
But I'm trying to keep the meeting
maybe you
short.
wanna just, because it'll give them an update on that.
Sure.
Where we are in that
Sure.
public gifts to schools, which is so confusing.
Yeah, so Susan Fox provided us a report on where the policy committee is at. They've had 2 meetings in March, the 15th and 23rd, continuing to review and discuss current board policy 840, which is about public gifts to schools. Completed most of the Neola 5000 series, and the committee needs to review a few of them with Dan coming up in April. The committee is holding the 6000s finance to get assurance that these have been reviewed by Jared, and we'll move ahead with the 7000s through 9000s in April with the goal of finishing the series by the end of the month. The committee plans to bring the entire manual to the full board, possibly starting in May, mostly over the summer. So that's, I guess, a little bit of a preview of what we have in store for homework assignments from the policy committee. The personnel committee still wants to review the 3000s in advance of the full board. We can submit these to that committee in April or May. So I guess there is sort of a question here for the personnel committee, and that can be worked out directly with Susan then as the chair of policy. Next time the policy committee meeting is in April, on April 6th at 9:30 a.m. in the district office. Any further discussion, questions about that? And next up is Employee Relations Committee. Dean?
I think it'd be very brief. The Employee Relations Committee, formerly known as the ERC, was just a little bit background. It was set up in the process of putting together the teacher handbook a few years ago, and it was designed that well, in that handbook there's a procedure for grievance procedure when it has to do with discipline or termination of an employee, and we felt that if there were other issues or concerns that arose out of the handbook or out of the policies related to it, that there needs to be some opportunity to appeal and be heard, and so we've had 2 cases thus far at this point, and basically what we do, I'll tell you what our procedure is. I don't get into the case because cases because there's that's a degree of confidentiality, but basically we hear the complaint by the employee for whatever reasons it may be, an exception to a policy or it might have to do with job descriptions and that sort of thing, and then the committee, it's a 2-person committee. Then the committee hears the administration's view on that point of view. The administration is asked to step out of the room, as well as the complainant, and then the committee puts together a proposal that they make to the superintendent. The policy reads that the ultimate deference should be given to the superintendent. So this goes basically as a recommendation to the superintendent, and the superintendent can accept, reject, or modify that recommendation. And I can tell you, in the first case we had, it was a matter of setting aside policy, and we heard the situation, and we took the superintendent's recommendation on that, and the more recent runs, we discussed it and offered the superintendent an alternative to the situation, and that gets resolved. And in this case, the superintendent did go along with our recommendation, and the situation seems to be resolved to the benefit of all parties. I think these will be handled, I believe, in the future. We will probably, after we think about it a little more, probably in a closed session situation, reporting to the board, because I know the general board members would like to have more specifics on the situation. But the nature of these cases are that there's a certain degree of confidentiality needs to be preserved. Okay, that's it.
Good. Thank you, Dean. Questions, Susan?
So Dean, when a request is made to the ERC and it relates to a board policy, in this particular case, did you maintain adherence to board policy, or?
Did you say that again?
So, did the ERC request that was heard relate to a board policy?
The more recent one?
Yes.
No, it had to do with practices, basically.
Okay,
Practices,
so it wasn't policy. The only reason I'm asking is because if it's a board policy issue and you feel that you need to make a recommendation that doesn't necessarily validate board policy, you would send that to us so that we could review the board policy, right?
ultimately.
Okay.
Most of these cases, I think, are going to be interpretations of existing policy and whether there should be reasonable exceptions in personnel cases.
Okay.
The only one that directly dealt with policy was the first one, and that did not become an issue because we simply validated the policy. The request by the individual was to make an exception to that policy, and I suppose that could be done
So
on
for instance-
recommendation of the committee and superintendent of the board,
Right, what I'm looking at.
but it
from-
wasn't.
What I'm looking at from a policy point of view is if in fact in that first case, you did make a recommendation that made an exception to policy, then what we would wanna do is go back in that policy and make it clear that an exception could be reviewed under the ERC. And we'd actually, and validated by the superintendent, we'd actually put that language in there so that it was clear that you could do that. So in that case, you did not make an exception to policy, so I would say under that case, there wouldn't be any reason
Sure.
to reevaluate that policy. But if in fact in this case, you felt that circumstances should be heard, that the policy was either too restrictive or not fair, or then, and you wanted to make a different decision than the policy mandated, then it's helpful for you to send that back to policy and say, make sure you put language in there that lets us do that.
Thank you.
Did that make sense?
I think we understand.
And then the other thing.
The problem is if it's, timeliness in these cases is usually a factor. So to refer it and have the
No, no.
policy committee go through that process.
That isn't what I was talking about. I'm talking about you making your decision, but once it's made and you realize what the result is, then you would send
Yeah.
information to the policy, because the policy doesn't say that you do that, but if in fact you feel that the policy obstructed
Needs some
your
leeway.
ability to be fair, then you
Sure.
wanna make sure that gets back to us.
Jennifer?
Just a quick comment. I think the process works well because we're all present in the room, even if we leave the room for a moment, but we come back, and when we make the recommendation to the superintendent, it's a conversation across the table. So I think when issues come up, it'll be a shared conversation about how did this happen, what do we wanna do next, what are appropriate steps. So I hear you, and I think because there are multiple people involved, that I think trends and hiccups and that kind of thing are gonna be brought forward. That's my sense anyway, from our early beginnings here, so.
Good, thank you.
Well,
Thank you for being
parallel
here.
to this case, the MGEA made some recommendations for policy changes as well, which part of the understanding at the end is that the personnel committee would review those policies in October.
Yeah. And let's make it clear, and I know we kind of sometimes use the word policy versus, these are actual handbook issues, not policy manual issues.
Oh, okay, okay. Because
Yeah,
sometimes
so far, the
those
ones that
are,
we've had, yeah.
sometimes that is a policy,
Right.
it's in the handbook. Okay,
Correct.
okay.
So the two that we've
Super,
dealt with
that's
so
helpful.
far
Okay.
have not been policy, but
Okay.
I agree, your point's well taken, should policy be involved?
Okay, great.
Well, the first one did.
That was a handbook issue, not a board
No.
policy, the first one.
Oh. Okay, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, and the personnel committee did review that.
Well,
Okay.
again, one of the things we've talked about, and I'll talk about it at the end, maybe we want to have a board conversation about seeing if there's anything else we want to add to this particular policy, like, there's no requirement for reporting out to the board, and maybe you also want to add, if in fact there's a suggestion that comes out of this process for a policy change, you have a check off and you send it to us.
Yeah, I
So that
agree,
we
I
see
agree
it.
with the comments that we've kind of learned how this practice
Mhm.
Yeah.
will mature.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, we're gonna turn our attention to unfinished business. The first up is the discussion and possible approval of revised board policy 345.11, rank in class. I didn't know if you had any
Just,
staff who wanted to.
Well, real brief, this is the second reading, so we did have a discussion at the last meeting about the rationale for it, so instead of rehashing that, I guess I'd leave it to, if anyone has any questions or would like, perhaps a refresher into any discussion, but otherwise I'll just leave it at that. Are there any questions on the proposed policy?
I think everyone who's here tonight was also here for the discussion. Has anything else come up since then? I think we'd be looking for a motion to approve the revised board policy 345.11, rank in class, as presented in our board docs where the complete document appears. Is there someone who'd like to make that motion?
also move
Thank you.
approval.
Is there a second? Oh, good, Susan, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the revised board policy 345, please say, please say aye.
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 And that was all three of you, I think, so I don't need to call for any opposed. It passed. Thank you. Another item of unfinished business that we have is discussion and possible approval of final notice of
Carrie,
non-renewal.
Carrie.
Oh, yeah.
Don't we need Carrie to vote so we have the quorum?
Oh,
Just to make sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Next thing is discussion and possible approval of final notice of non-renewal of teacher contract for the purpose of staff reduction. That one has us looking for, motion for approval. Is there, discussion on this topic before we move on? This says move approval of final notice of non-renewal of teacher contract for the purpose of staff reduction as presented. Someone like to make that motion?
Does this apply to individuals, or is it a policy?
Individual.
An individual?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you recall, a preliminary notice was approved by the board in the last meeting, so this is the final.
All right, we're looking for a motion?
Yes.
Is there someone interested in making that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Good, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the final notice of non-renewal of teacher contract as presented in the board docs, please say aye.
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 Aye. And that's all of us. Good, thank you, that passes. Next up is new business, discussion and possible approval of a contract for Director of Student Services. Dan? Is that anything you wanted to comment on?
No, we have the contract that's there before you, so we're asking for approval as presented for contract, and I guess we'll say publicly for Kristen McCumber.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve a contract for Director of Student Services as presented.
Good, thank you. Is there a second?
I'd second.
Good, thank you. All right, any further discussion? Good. All in favor of approving Kristen McCumber's contract as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's all of us again? Thank you. Very good.
I like the minutes to show that that was unanimous.
Yes.